Okay, so for today's algorithms, sorry, I forgot to start. We're going to be doing, so the acronymized case-insensitive string compare, and is that it? No, there's reverse. Or that tomorrow. No, reverse. So case-insensitive string compare, so acronymized. If we're talking about these built-in functions, and we're thinking about big O, how does that present a problem for us? Like if we're trying to control how fast or the big O of our acronymized algorithm, what's the problem with these built-in functions?
They're getting called from a class somewhere that we don't see.
Yeah, we don't know how they work, right? These might, so we have a loop here, which is going to give us a big O of n, because every time for every input, this loop is going to run. But we don't know how these work. We don't know, are these using a loop, right? We don't know how they work under the hood in JavaScript. So how does JavaScript decide to change, from a lowercase to uppercase, right? Is it using a loop? Is it using something else? So using the built-in functions in the algorithms, you want to be, I mean, I don't want to say like never use them, but you want to use them with caution, because we don't know how they operate. We don't know what they're doing to our algorithm. So we want to try to use or avoid using built-in functions if we can. We want to use just sort of loops and, basically just, stick to loops as opposed to the built-ins. Okay, does that make sense, everyone? Okay, so again, if you want to try to find a different solution to this other than using the char add and the two uppercase, if you have time, go ahead and do that. But otherwise, the algorithms for today are case-insensitive string compare. Okay, so if we're going to do the riot system, basically we want to take in a string take in two strings and determine if they are the same, excluding case, right? So in this case, you'll probably have to use the two upper, two lower, but what is our input for this? What does the function take in?
String.
How many?
Just one string. 3 strings?
No, so we're comparing, so we're taking like ABC, right? And we want to compare them. We want to say, is the lowercase version of this string the same thing? So we're taking in two strings, right? So our parameters are stir A and stir B, right? And so our input is two strings. What is our output?
Boolean.
Boolean, right? So we want to take these strings, and inside of our function, we want to do something that's going to return the correct Boolean, right? So if we have ABC all caps, and then the second string is ABC lowercase, we should return true. Okay, so for the second one, we have ABC again, but the next time, or the next string that takes in is ABD, right? So this should return false. Okay, because obviously they're not the same string, just lowercase. And then the third example, we take in ABC, and if the second string is just BC, we return false. Okay, so what's a check we could do? Like, what's the first thing we could compare to immediately save us some computation time?
The length of the string.
Yeah. Say if they're not the same length, return false, right? We're done. So that would be like, that would cut down on the operations we have to perform. We don't have to go through all of we can check the length before we even bother going through the loop. Okay, cool. And if you're able to unmute yourself and answer, please do, because I don't see the chat for like minutes afterwards, and I don't want to like leave anybody out. Okay, so how do we start this?
Pseudo code.
Pseudo code, yeah. So what do we, and actually first thing I want to put in my test cases. So I want it's supposed to return a Boolean. So I'm going to console.log and I'm going to invoke the function case insensitive string compare, and then I'm going to pass it all of the examples, right? So I'm going to copy that, paste it, stir E1. And I'm just going to put all these in here so they're ready to go. So then it becomes stir E2s, right? Those are 2s and then 3s, is that right? Yeah. So I want to run this file probably 50 or 60 times when I'm trying to solve this, right? So remember, write a line of code, test it. Write a line of code, test it, okay? So, and then to run it, I'm just going to go to day one, open an integrated terminal, and I would just say, make sure I'm in the right place, node, case insensitive return, so I get undefined each time, okay? So what's the pseudocode? What's our first step?
A conditional for comparing the length of the strings.
Okay. Compare length of strings. And if unequal, right? If not equal, return false. Okay, then what's next?
It would be another conditional, probably an else if, that it's going to change the case of the strings and then compare them.
Cool. Change case of strings and compare. And then I'm just going to say return true if equal, right?
No way to check for the individual characters.
Oh, well, I mean, there's two ways. I mean, there's multiple ways to do it. You could loop. For this one, I think it's okay to just use built-in functions. Looping might create additional overhead that isn't really necessary. But I'll let you guys, you guys can work on it and see if you come up with something better than I could come up with. Okay, any questions on this one? Any questions? And you want to sort of, when you look at an algorithm, think of edge cases, right? So if an interviewer submits this to you and says, okay, write me a function that's going to compare these strings, right? Ask questions, right? So think of like the extremes. What if the string's empty? What do you want me to return, right? And they'll tell you, well, okay, so if the string is empty, I want you to return false or true or whatever, right? Okay. Anybody else? Anybody see any other problems, edge cases, issues you might have solving this algorithm?
Well, theoretically, you could have a space
Yeah.
in the string, and technically the letters would still be the same, but it would come back as false because the length is different.
Right. Yeah. So like if we had this, right, that would change it to, it would come out false. So if I were the interviewer, I would say, okay, don't worry about, you won't have to worry about spaces. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Next one is reverse. So you're given a string and you're need to write a function that will return the given string reversed, right? So what is the input?
One string,
One string, right? What is the expected output?
one string.
Perfect. So you're given a string, you want to return a string, and yeah. Any questions, edge cases? This one I think is pretty straightforward. And again, for the first couple ones, I wouldn't worry too much about big O and all that stuff. You can use built-in functions, but as we progress, the goal would be to use fewer and fewer of the built-ins, okay? What would you do if you have no idea Like, I don't know where to start with this. I want to reverse a string. What would you do?
I'll probably look at the lesson plans just to see if there's anything that talks about reversing.
Look at the lesson plans, or what else do we have at our disposal?
You can open up Google.
Google,
Internet.
programmer's best friend, right? JavaScript reverse string. Now, don't cheat. Like, don't just take the, but look at for, you know, solutions, things you can do to help you out. All right, questions? All right, I know we kind of went long, so let's do the case insensitive string compare first. And then if there's time, we can go on to the reverse, okay? So I'm gonna break you guys into groups. I'm just gonna do it randomly. And let me stop sharing and stop recording.